started back in 2011. I graduated high school and I moved to the UK, and I was playing for the Tondy Rugby Club, which is the out of Aberkenfig, Wales. And a couple of days into being there, I'm sitting at the club and watching some rugby, and the club obviously has its own bar, and in walks this really big guy, and he's wearing a beanie, and you could just tell, like, this guy's, it's a big dude. Like, you don't see people built like that, often, and when they are built like that, you're like, okay, what sport do you play, So he walks in, you can't quite see him, he's at the bar, grabs a drink, and he heads outside, and then I'm like, man, that dude is huge. Who's that guy? And guy actually became a really, really good friend of mine, was sitting next to me. He goes, dude, that's Jerry Collins. I was like, no way. I got a poster of that guy in my room growing up as a kid. Like, no, seriously? And he's like, yeah, he plays for the Ospreys. He comes down to the club once in a while, and and at the time I was like, oh man, that's so cool. But like, as I came to know Jerry, it's like that's just so him, just coming by a rugby club to have a beer or something like that. That's just who he is. He's not the kind of guy to be in like big clubs and stuff. So anyways, so he comes back inside, and my buddy goes, hey, JC, I want to introduce you to somebody. Of course, comes over, super nice guy. And he goes, oh, what's up? And he's like, oh, this is Ryan from the U.S. And I'm like, hey, Ryan Matayas, like, nice to meet you. He's like, oh, what's up? And we just start talking, right? Oh, you're from the U.S. and what you doing over here? Oh, I'm playing rugby and whatever, and talking about sports, and his favorite team's the Bengals, and we're talking about that, and he's talking about basketball and how he loves loved American sports and stuff like that. And anyways, so I'm sitting there, and he walks up, he goes to the bar, and he grabs a drink, and he brings me back a beer, and I'm like, I'm not just gonna like let this dude just buy me a drink. So before he was even getting close, it was probably like, I don't know, it was about a quarter of his pint left. I jumped up, grabbed 2 beers, kind of mid-conversation, and brought it back, and he kind of looked at me like, he was like, oh, okay, all right, cool. So he buys me a beer, I buy him a beer, we're talking and whatever, and then as the kind of night, goes on and shakes out, a bunch of guys are headed out to town or whatever, and I'm like, all right, well, see you guys later, and he's like, hey, Uso, and I was like, what? And he's just like, hey, you gonna come? And I was like, no, I was just gonna stay. He's like, nah, you're coming. I was like, oh, okay. And that pretty much kicked it off, man. And what was it, like the end of kind of the night fizzled out or whatever, and he's like, oh, you need to ride home or whatever? And I was like, I'm like, I got here 3 days ago, man. I actually don't know where my house is. Like, if you just drop me at the rugby club, I know how to walk home from there. And he's like, nah, just stay with me. I got you, man. I got you. And I was like, all right, man, sure, whatever. We're like, sure, all right, cool. Next day, wake up, we get some food, we're hanging out, and then drops me off, and he goes, here, take my number down. Go get some food or hang out or whatever, and I'll show you around. And I'm like, dude, I actually don't even have a phone right now. Like, I'm not joking. I got here 3 days ago. I got to get the UK. I got to get a different SIM card and whatever. And he was just like, wrote his number down. He's like, dude, seriously, when you get a phone, shoot me a text. And I was like, all right, cool. So a week and a half goes by, and I'm like, dude, no ways this guy's gonna remember me. Like, he's not gonna, And so I got a phone like a week and a half later, and I'm looking at this number, and I'm like, I'm not gonna text him. He's not gonna remember me. Like, this dude's a freaking 50 test cap, all black captain, like legend. Like, he's not gonna remember me. He's had a couple beers, whatever. Like, and I was like, fuck it, you know what, whatever. So I was like, hey, JC, it's Matayas. It's Ryan Matayas. And then, sure as shit, like a minute later, phone buzzes, and he's like, up to? And I'm like, well, I mean, I moved over to the UK just to play rugby, and so I had my own like little training schedule and stuff, and this was like a Sunday or something, and he just said, up to? And I'm like, nothing. And he's like, all right, be outside in 30 minutes. I'm like, all right, well, fuck, what are we gonna do? And then and that's pretty much how, that's pretty much what it was like with Jerry. It'd just be like, it'd be a Sunday, and all of a sudden I get a text message like, up to, and I'm like, it's a Sunday, I'm here to do nothing, man. And he's like, all right, cool, I'm already, and it got to the point where it's like, hey, like Sunday mornings, it'd just be like, come outside, it's hilarious. So, yeah, I ended up hanging out with him. We'd probably hang out like usually Wednesdays and like Sundays, those are their off days and stuff, and one time we were, it was the same thing, it was a Sunday, and I get the message like up to, and I'm like, nah, nothing. And he was like, sweet, come outside. He's like, bring a jacket too. I'm like, all right. And I never asked, you know, I never like asked like, what are we gonna do? Or like, oh, well, what's the plan? Like, nothing. It was just like, he's just the kind of guy who just lived in the moment, whatever. And at that time, I didn't have any, you know, responsibilities or anything. So I was just like, yeah, sure. And get in the car, and I'm like, I just kind of look at him, and he's like, we're gonna go to England real quick. And I'm like, okay, cool, sweet. And he's like, yeah, I got to captain this team, and it was for the Pacific Barbarians against the Australia 15, and it was a charity match for the earthquakes that happened in Christchurch in 2011. And this is one of the many stories that are just like this. It's so JC. Get in the car, drive down, get there. There's media and cameras flashing and stuff, and I'm just like, holy crap, man! I'm not used to, you know, I'm just a kid from Tucson. Like, oh, whoa, this is crazy. And then as we're walking into the clubhouse, because it's at like a rugby ground and stuff. As we're walking to get to the clubhouse, you know, everything's all guarded off, and there's a big like event tent, and there's tons of people there and stuff. And I see Doug Howlett. Obviously, like, I'm a huge rugby nerd, man. Like, I grew up like all I ever wanted to do is play professional rugby, and I see Dougie Howlett, and I was like, oh shit, Dougie Howlett. So as we're walking up, JC like, you know, hey, what's up, Dougie? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, hey, this is Moose O'Ryan. He's like, hey, just look after him, right, when I play. And he's like, oh, for sure, of course. And so I'm sitting there with Dougie, and then, you know, Casey Lalala comes over, and then this other guy from Munster, and I'm just spend the rest of the day talking to these guys who I've been watching for years, either through the All Blacks, and at the time Casey was at the Cardiff Blues. And I'm just standing like talking to these guys, and of course, they only care, all they want to talk about is American football and American basketball. They just love American sports, and I'm just like sitting here with some All Blacks, like no big deal, like, and I'm just, it was insane. Even later that day, actually, I met a very young Manu Tuolangi, which you know, is one of those people you see and you're like, that's someone, but I'm not. I mean, this was 2011, so he's very young, but. I have a photo of him anyways, but, yeah, so plenty of other stories of hanging around in Wales and stuff, but anyways, so while I was there, my dad, because I told my dad, I was like, hey, you never guess, like, you know, I hang out with Jerry Collins like about, you know, twice a week or so, like go get food, go get a couple drinks or something, and so my dad sends over a box of T-shirts from my home club, because we were the Tucson Barbarians, and obviously Jerry had played for the real Barbarian. Well, not, I guess they're all real, but the Barbarians, and you know, our got the logo that we've taken from the Barbarians. We borrowed from the Barbarians, and we got the little logo there, and like, you know, Tucson Barbarians around it, and I give it to JC. He's like, hey, my dad wanted me to give this to you. And my dad actually wanted to give another one to Adam Jones as well, who's a prop. My dad's a prop, so he's a big Adam Jones fan. So anyways, and yeah, sure as shit, you know, JC was wearing that shirt from time to time. I was like, dang, I thought he would have given it away. I didn't think he would actually like wear it and stuff. And yeah, so fast forward, you know, Wales ends. I move back to the States. JC goes to Japan. And then I'm, fast forward to 2014, I'm playing on the USA Sevens team, and I found out that I'm making the Wellington leg, and I said, hey, you know, I'm headed to your city, you know, and he's like, oh, hey, you ever need anything, you know, let me know. And I know with Jerry, he means that. Like, if you need anything, like, I'm not joking. One time we were leaving a restaurant, and there's a homeless guy on the ground with no shoes. Jerry literally takes off his shirt, takes off his socks, takes off his shoes, takes off his beanie, opens up his wallet, hands him all the cash, and, like, you know, his jacket and everything. And I'm just like, I've never seen that before in my entire life. I've never seen, like, I've seen people give someone like $5, like, here you go. Or I've seen someone buy someone meals, but not literally the shirt off their back. And, like, it's just one of those moments where you're like, dude, they like, you think, or you know, you think like celebrities or these high profile people that they're like, oh, they're a certain type, but you know, the most selfless, humble, I mean, literally the shirt off his back, you know, he fits the phrase. He's just the most selfless, humble, kind, genuine person. Anyway, so he goes, hey, you need anything, you're in my city, you know, I'll take care of you. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, hey, you're at this hotel, right? And I'm like, yeah, yeah. He's like, oh, that's where usually all the teams stay. And I'm like, yeah, man, I can get 2 tickets. So if you have family members that need some, and of course, like I'm thinking, like, man, I can maybe, I can give Jerry tickets sometime, because he always got me tickets for like the Ospreys and Cardiff Blues games when I was living in Wales. So I'm like, man, it's my turn to like, give back here, kind of thing. And he's like, I played there for a while. He's like, I can. He's like, don't worry. He's like, give the tickets to your teammates. He's like, I can get some tickets for my family, but appreciate it. And I'm like, ah. And so it was like an off day. It was like the morning of an off day. So it was Wednesday morning during the tournament week for Wellington Sevens. And I get a call to my room at like 5 a.m. saying, hey, there's someone here to see you. And I'm like, well, no, it's not JC because he's in Japan. I'm like, kind of like, okay. So I go down to the lobby and I turn the corner and these 5 huge Samoan dudes. And I'm like, I hope I'm not in trouble here. I'm like, and they're like, you Ryan? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, we grew up with JC. We're his family, and we just came to drop this off to you. And it was a box full of Hurricanes, Wellington Lions jerseys and shorts and T-shirts and like just. And it's just like, and he's like, oh, Jerry said you want to drop this off for your dad. And I'm just like, gosh, man, like, that's just, it's so telling. It's just, that's just who he was, he's just the kind of guy. And after the experience where, after that time when he took off, his shirt and gave his money and everything to the homeless person, we got in the car and I didn't say anything, and I was just kind of like, I turned and kind of looked at him. He's just like, you got to show love, man. You must always show love, bro. Like, no matter what, like, it's about the people, it's about taking care of people. And I was like, man, like, so, and then, again, flash forward later on into 2014, I moved down to New Zealand, and Jerry connects me, obviously with those guys, Junior and Ossie and Maddie, guys he grew up with. And he connects me with them and like, hey, bro, don't worry about it. They'll look after you. They'll take care of you. And he like sent me over his like Mizuno contact guy, which got me like, some Mizuno boots and hookups and stuff. And then he even connected me with this like this guy to get me a job, like a truck driving job. And I was like, I'm gonna do some concrete, but I appreciate the truck driving job. I'm like, I don't want that kind of liability on the other side of the road, but. And his boys looked after me all the time. I'd kind of same thing, going to town, hang out with them, and they invited me to their like family reunions and stuff like that, and really took care of me and took me in, and spent holidays with them, and obviously at this time, again being down in New Zealand in 2015, so I was there 2014 and 2015 2015 is when he passed away. And, it was, being in New Zealand, it was one of those, it was just like, it was tough, man. I mean, the day that he passed away, it was, the country was pretty silent, it was pretty quiet because Jerry was such a larger than life figure, and the people who knew him and cared about him, I mean, he had a lot of, there were a lot of people that he did a lot for their lives. As a person, not just as a rugby player, not just as the way he played. And, a lot of people knew him as a player, as a, the Terminator and fucking tough as nails. I mean, they don't make those guys anymore. You know what I mean? He was proper old school. He's an old school dude. And so yeah, obviously, we went down for the funeral and that, and it was again, here's this moment in my life where, through some way, I don't know how I've ended up here. I'm standing next to, at some point, Jonah Lamu and Ma'ananu and, legends of the game, absolute legends. And, I mean, I don't have any photos of these things or anything, and that's, I don't know, I mean, that's not what it's about, right? It's not about like, I never had that mentality either, anyways, with Jerry or anything. Like, he was getting his old school. He'd be like the last guy who'd be like, yeah, guys, let's take a photo. You know what I mean? But here I am in this moment in time where I'm surrounded by these legends, and I'm just like blown away. I'm just like, how did I even get here? But going back to 2011 when I moved to Wales because I want to be a professional rugby player. I want to try play for the Eagles and play professional rugby. And I was obviously I was there to train and to try and get better, to come back, to try to make it to the Eagles and stuff. So that was always my dream. And he'd tell me, he's like, you'll get there, man. You'll play for the Eagles, and you'll get to play against the All Blacks. And I just like, at that time, it was so far away, and it was 10 years ago. And then to think about my journey from that point when he said that, and like the thought crossing my mind of like lining up against someone like him, I'd be like, it's so far away, But no, him telling me that to me was just like here's a guy who's he's played for Toulon and All Blacks, and somehow we become friends, and he's telling me like, yeah, you'll play for the U.S. and you'll play against the All Blacks, like, and I'm sure it'll it's hit me to some point, and I'm sure it'll really hit me walking out on that field and standing in front of the haka will be just a moment of a lifetime. You couldn't write it. You couldn't write a script like this. It's just it's so special.